My name is Rashid Khan, though everyone calls me Khan Sahib. I'm the constable of Kalapur, population 912 when everyone's home from the cities. Our village sits in a valley of the Margala Hills, surrounded by forests so dense that mobile signals fade within minutes of leaving the main road. The nearest proper town is an hour of switchback mountain roads away, and the last government office that tried opening here closed within 8 months. We prefer it this way. I grew up in the house where my father grew up, where his father lived before him. 3 generations of Khans have kept order in a place where everyone knows everyone's secrets, where old grudges simmer quietly but rarely boil over, and where the worst problems are usually young men racing motorcycles too fast on mountain curves. This is the kind of village where doors stay unlocked, where a man's word is his bond, where neighbors appear with food when illness strikes. It's also the kind of village where certain matters don't get discussed with outsiders. My first month as constable, back in 2008 when my father still wore the uniform and hadn't yet been diagnosed with the heart condition that would kill him 3 years later, he called me into our small office and pulled out a weathered notebook. The cover was leather, cracked with age, the pages brittle and yellow. The handwriting changed every several dozen entries. I recognized my grandfather's careful Urdu script, then my father's hurried scrawl, then others I didn't know. "This never leaves our family," he said, sliding it across the desk. "Every constable since 1891 has kept these records. Now you must read them and understand." The notebook had no title, but someone had written on the inside cover in faded ink, "Events during the mist season." I spent that entire night reading. By dawn prayer, I'd learned that Kalapur harbored something that defied explanation, that couldn't be stopped with authority or reason, and absolutely could not be ignored. My father had documented the winter of 1997 extensively. My grandfather recorded the horror of 1962. Before them, constables whose names I'd seen on the mosque memorial described encounters reaching back to British colonial times. They all described variations of the same phenomenon. Every year, from December 20th until January 10th, what the elders called the mist season, people began seeing things, hearing things, and sometimes they vanished. The guidelines had been developed across generations, written in grief and hard-won understanding. They weren't suggestions. They were survival rules refined through 130 years of mistakes that cost lives and methods that saved them. 9 rules. I memorized them before the sun rose that morning. Rule 1. Never investigate disappearances during mist season alone. The notebook overflowed with entries describing constables, even army officers, who'd gone into the mountains alone searching for missing persons. Few returned. Those who did came back transformed in ways that defied medical understanding. They aged decades overnight, or forgot their mother tongue, or spoke with voices that didn't match their own. One constable in 1931 returned after 5 days claiming he'd only been gone an hour. He died 4 weeks later, still insisting it was December 20th. Rule 2. If you find footprints leading up cliffs, do not follow them. This appeared in entries dating back to the 1870s. The prints always materialized on impossible surfaces, clear boot marks or bare feet ascending vertical rock faces where no human could climb. Following them led searchers into terrain that became unfamiliar even to shepherds who'd grazed flocks there for decades. Paths shifted. Landmarks disappeared. Those who returned described walking in circles for hours, always seeing those impossible prints just ahead, always feeling observed by something that breathed but never showed itself. Rule 3. When someone claims to see a deceased family member, keep them confined for 4 days. My grandfather's section emphasized this rule heavily. He'd learned it brutally in 1962 when a widow named Amina Bibi saw her husband, dead 5 years from a rock slide, standing at her courtyard gate. She ran to embrace him. That night, she knocked on her sister's door saying her husband wanted the sister to visit, that he'd been waiting to apologize for an old quarrel. The sister went. Neither was seen again. The confinement wasn't punishment. It was protection. Whatever appeared wearing the faces of the dead needed invitation, needed someone to willingly follow. Rule 4. The old shrine at Garib Baba's Peak is forbidden after sunset year-round. Garib Baba's shrine had been abandoned since 1947 after 3 people died there under mysterious circumstances. The path was blocked with stones and warnings. But during mist season, villagers reported hearing qawwali music echoing from the peak, voices chanting verses in archaic Persian, the ringing of bells that hadn't hung there for decades. Young men on dares tried climbing at night. Some succeeded in reaching it. None spoke afterward about what they found in the darkness. One boy in 2003 had to be sent to Rawalpindi for psychiatric care. He drew the same image repeatedly, a doorway that opened onto nothing, leading to a place where dead saints still performed their rituals. Rule 5. If a child draws the figure with too many arms, remove them from the village immediately. Children saw it first. Always children under 9, still young enough that their minds hadn't learned what was real and what wasn't. They'd wake from nightmares and draw pictures of a figure impossibly tall, with multiple limbs reaching in directions that hurt to observe, and a face that kept shifting between features. My father's entries described 3 instances where parents dismissed these drawings as imagination. In each case, the child vanished within a week. The drawings were found in empty bedrooms, but the images had changed. Now the many-armed figure held a smaller shape, and both wore expressions that suggested neither sorrow nor joy, just eternal patience. Rule 6. Never speak the name of someone who disappeared during mist season. This was the cruelest rule. When someone you knew, someone you'd shared meals with, vanished into the December fog, every instinct screamed to call their name, organize search parties, plaster their photograph everywhere. But the notebook was explicit. Speaking their name gave power to whatever took them, created a connection. People who refused to accept loss, who called out those names in the mountains, who wouldn't stop searching, they disappeared too. The only mercy was silence. Let them go quietly and you might survive. Rule 7. The carvings on the ancient maple tree are not decorative. The maple stood in the village center, older than any building, so massive 6 men linking hands couldn't circle it. My grandmother, my mother's mother who came from an old mountain family, had taught me to read the symbols carved deep into its bark. They weren't made by any recent culture. They'd been there longer than anyone could remember. The symbols told a story of something that lived in these mountains before humans arrived, something that grew hungry when the barrier between worlds thinned during the darkest, coldest days of winter. Something that wore whatever shape it needed to lure prey away from warmth and light. My grandmother called it Dai Kadam, though that wasn't quite accurate. The old mountain people had a phrase for it that roughly translated to, the thing that walks beside you. But in Kalapur, people simply called it the Mist Walker. I'll be honest, when I first read these rules, I thought they were folklore, colorful local mythology preserved by isolation and superstition. I had training from the police academy in Islamabad. I'd studied modern investigation techniques, criminal psychology, evidence gathering. I believed in things that could be proven and explained. Then came December of 2008, my first mist season as constable, and belief became irrelevant. The mist walker didn't care what I believed. It only cared whether I followed the rules or suffered the consequences. December 20th arrived with temperature dropping to freezing. I remember because I'd planned to take my son Hamza, he was 5 then, to see the snow monkeys in the upper valleys. But that morning Shabana Begum called our office crying. Her nephew Tariq hadn't returned from a hiking trip with his university friends. 3 boys, all 20 years old, had gone exploring the northern ridges to photograph wildlife. Tariq was supposed to return by evening on the 19th. It was now morning and calls to his mobile went unanswered. I found my father in our office, already dressed in uniform despite it being Saturday, staring at the notebook opened on his desk. "I know," he said before I could speak. "Shabana called me first. I told her we'd look." He stood, and I saw the effort it required, how his hand pressed against his chest as if to quiet an unsteady heart. "This is it, Rashid. Your first mist season as a lawman. Everything changes now." We took 2 motorcycles and rode the rocky trails toward the northern ridges. The December forest was stunning. Pine branches heavy with frost, morning mist clinging to valleys like silk scarves, beautiful enough to make you forget that beauty and danger coexist in these mountains. We found the boys' campsite without difficulty. The tent stood intact, sleeping bags arranged neatly, a cold fire ring with half-burned wood. Nothing appeared disturbed. Their backpacks remained, phones and wallets inside. A cooler held food untouched. But the boys were gone. "Stay close," my father said, voice tight. "Follow Rule 1. We searched in expanding circles, calling out, watching for signs. That's when I saw them. Footprints in the frost near a stream. Boot prints the correct size for young men. But they pointed upward. Toward a cliff face so steep even experienced climbers wouldn't attempt it without equipment. "Don't," my father said sharply when I moved toward them. "That's Rule 2, son. Whatever made those tracks wants you to follow." The boys made their choice. We cannot help them if we're taken too. We searched until sunset, following protocols my father learned from his father. We stayed within calling distance. We marked our trail. We didn't follow the impossible prints even when they appeared again and again, leading toward heights no human could reach. We didn't find the boys. That night, back at our office, my father updated the notebook. 3 names added to a list stretching back generations. Tariq Hassan, Bilal Raza, Ahmed Malik. Last seen December 19, 2008. Footprints found ascending impossible surfaces. Status: lost to missed season. That's it. I demanded. We just write them off? Stop searching? No, my father said quietly. We keep looking, but we do it intelligently. We do it safely. Because that's what those boys would want. For us to live even if they can't. Shabana Begum never forgave us for ending the search. She moved to Lahore that spring, couldn't bear the village where her nephew vanished. I couldn't blame her. What I couldn't tell her, couldn't make her understand, was that following those impossible prints would have meant more grieving families, more names in the notebook, more fuel for the mist walker's hunger. 3 boys were gone. Wanted more. It always wanted more during mist season. But that was just the beginning. On December 23rd, old Bashir Ahmed walked into our office, face colorless, hands trembling. Bashir was 71, tough as mountain oak, a veteran who'd served in the '65 war with India and survived things that would destroy younger men. But he looked destroyed now, confused and terrified equally. Khan Sahib, he said to my father, I need to report a trespasser. My son is on my property. Your son? I glanced at my father, who'd gone completely still. Javed. He's standing in the back garden near the well. Been there since dawn. Bashir's voice cracked. But Khan Sahib, Javed died 11 years ago. Heart attack. I carried him to burial myself, placed him in the ground at the village cemetery. I know he's dead. But he's standing in my garden right now, wearing the shower kameez I buried him in. My father closed his eyes. Sit down, Bashir Sahib. Rashid, bring water. I'm not losing my mind, Khan Sahib. I know what I saw. I believe you. My father opened his eyes, and I saw the burden of knowledge there, the weight of understanding things that shouldn't exist. Rashid, call Begum Nazreen. Tell her we need the confinement room prepared. And call Hakim Sahib. Tell him it's a Rule 3 situation. Bashir Ahmed spent the next 4 days in what we called the confinement room, actually a spare room in elderly Nazreen Begum's house, comfortable but secure. We told inquiring neighbors he was having dizzy spells, that Hakim Sahib wanted him under observation. Bashir understood. He'd lived in Kalapur his entire life. He knew the rules even if he'd never expected to experience them personally. On the 4th day he returned to our office, still shaken but clear-headed. It's gone, he told us. I went home this morning. The garden's empty. He paused, voice dropping to a whisper. But Khan Sahib, I heard him calling me last night. From the forest behind my house. He used my childhood nickname, the one only family knew. Said he wanted to show me something wonderful I had to see before I died. Said he'd been waiting 11 years. Couldn't I come just for a moment? But you didn't go, my father said. I didn't go. Bashir's hands clenched. Because it wasn't him. Couldn't be. Javed never used that nickname after he married. It was private between us as father and son. Whatever was in those woods wearing his face, it knew things it shouldn't know. The mask didn't fit quite right. We added Bashir's report to the notebook. Javed Ahmed's name went in a special section, faces worn by the mist walker. Dozens of names filled those pages spanning decades. Parents, spouses, children, all dead, all buried, all seen walking the edges of Kalapur during mist season, calling to the living with voices that almost but not quite matched memory. 4 days later came another call. Different situation, equally wrong. Sultana Bibi taught 3rd class at Kalapur Primary School. She'd worked there 19 years, knew every family in the village, remembered birthdays of students who'd graduated decades ago. When she called our office at 2 in the afternoon on December 27th, she wasn't crying or panicking. Her voice was calm, professional, terrifying in its composure. Khan Sahib, this is Sultana. Please come to the school immediately. Bring your father if possible. We have a Rule 5 situation. My father was having a difficult day, the heart condition making his chest tight and breathing labored. But he insisted on coming. Rule 5, he muttered as we drove to the school. Allah protect us. I prayed we'd get through one winter without Rule 5. Sultana met us at the door, her face carefully neutral in the way adults mask fear around children. She led us to her classroom where a little girl sat alone at a desk, crayons scattered around her. The girl, I recognized her as Zainab Durrani, 8 years old, daughter of the shopkeeper who sold provisions on the main road, was drawing with intense concentration. She's been drawing the same picture since morning, Sultana said quietly. Won't draw anything else. Won't discuss it. Just keeps making the same image repeatedly. I looked at the papers covering the table. At least 15 drawings, all identical, all showing a figure impossibly tall, stretched vertically, with multiple arms extending in geometrically wrong directions. The figure had no clear face, just a suggestion of features that seemed to shift depending on viewing angle. The hands were detailed though, fingers too long and too many, reaching toward a smaller figure. The smaller figure was unmistakably Zainab, and in every picture both figures wore expressions that suggested neither happiness nor sadness, just infinite waiting with mouths that curved too wide, revealing too many teeth in spiral rows. My father turned to Sultana. When did she start? During morning recess about 9 o'clock. She asked if I'd ever seen the figure with many arms who lives in the mist. I said no, and she said he's been visiting her room at night for the past week. Said he stands by her window and watches her sleep. Said he's very quiet and very patient, and he promises to show her wonderful things if she'll just come with him after dark. Sultana's composure cracked slightly. Khan Sahib, I've known Zainab since kindergarten. She doesn't lie. She doesn't have an imagination that runs dark. This isn't fantasy. This is something she's experiencing. We called Zainab's parents, explained the situation as gently as possible. There was no gentle way to tell someone their child had been marked by something ancient and hungry, that staying in the village meant watching her disappear, that the only option was to pack immediately and leave, no questions asked. To their credit, Mahmood and Shabnam Durrani didn't argue. They'd lived in Kalapur long enough to know that when the constable invoked the rules, you obeyed. By evening they were driving to Shabnam's brother's house in Peshawar. The last I saw of Zainab, she was sleeping in the back seat, her drawings left behind in a folder that went into my father's locked cabinet. I examined one later, studying it by lamplight. The many-armed figure, the mist walker, whatever you called it. The image triggered revulsion in ways I couldn't articulate. It was wrong in fundamental ways that bypassed logic and activated pure instinct. The same instinct that made our ancestors fear darkness, that made children hide under blankets, that made grown men walk faster past graveyards at night. 4 incidents in 7 days, my father said, updating the notebook. More than usual. Is it getting bolder? Or hungrier? I suggested. He looked at me and I saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for me, for the burden I'd eventually inherit. Same thing, son. For the mist walker, they're the same thing. December wore on. The mist season deepened. Every day brought new strangeness, new violations of natural order. Hunters reported finding mountain goats with their insides removed but no blood, arranged in circles and clearings. Hikers got lost on trails they'd walked hundreds of times, found hours later with no memory of where they'd been. Dogs refused to go outside after dark, whining and hiding even when their owners commanded them. Birds stopped singing. The usual sounds of mountain life, rustling leaves, distant wolves, wind through pines, all faded to unnatural silence that made your ears ring. And every night, someone reported seeing deceased loved ones standing at property edges, calling from the tree line, visible in the split second between closing and opening your eyes. The confinement room stayed occupied. Hakim Sahib started sleeping at his clinic, ready for inevitable calls. My father's health declined rapidly. The stress of mist season always affected him badly, but this year was worse. By January 3rd he could barely walk, the chest pains so severe he had to dictate notebook entries while I wrote. Deputy Constable Imran and I handled most calls, always in pairs, always following Rule 1. It was Imran who found the next victim, though victim isn't quite accurate for what we discovered on January 5th. An anonymous caller reported something strange near Garib Baba's shrine. Imran and I rode up, arriving just before sunset, that golden hour when shadows stretch long and the boundary between day and night becomes uncertain. The shrine path was still blocked with stones and warnings. But at the path's base someone had cleared a narrow trail. Not wide, maybe 2 feet across, but clear enough that flashlights revealed it continuing upward into mist. And around that trail, arranged in careful circles, were 7 objects. A prayer cap, a child's shoe, a pocket watch, reading glasses, a coin, a photograph, and a knife. Imran knelt to examine them without touching. These are old. Really old. That pocket watch is pre-partition. And the photo. He leaned closer. It's a colonial-era portrait. British India, maybe? I crouched beside him. The items were dusty but well-preserved, arranged with obvious intention. And in the circle's center, pressed into frozen earth, was a handprint. A handprint with 7 fingers, each one too long and bent at too many joints. We need to leave, I said. Right now. But Imran was staring past me, his face gone slack. Rashid, look at the shrine. I turned slowly, knowing I wouldn't like what I saw. Words had appeared on the blocked path stones, not written but carved, as if someone had dragged impossibly sharp claws through solid rock. The letters were rough but legible, spelling a message that made my blood freeze. 7 days remain. 9 debts unpaid. The Mist Walker demands what's owed. We documented everything with photographs, collected the items for evidence, and were back on our motorcycles before full darkness fell. But riding away, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see something following. The road behind remained empty, but that somehow felt worse than if something had actually been there. That night, I sat with my father in his room, both of us too anxious to sleep. He declined rapidly in the past week, looking more like 81 than 61, his chest rising and falling with effort. The Mist Walker is escalating, he said. 9 debts. That's never happened before. What does it mean? I don't know. That's what frightens me. He gestured weakly at the notebook which I'd brought. Read the entry from 1891. The very first one. I found the page. The handwriting was archaic Urdu, difficult to decipher, but I made out the words. It came in December of this year, as it has come in Decembers past, as the old mountain people warned it would. 9 of us entered the shrine seeking refuge from its pursuit. 9 of us made a pact written in blood on stone, promising we would deny it nothing, feed it our obedience until it grew satisfied and left our valley. We kept that promise, but the thing does not forget debts. It does not forgive broken covenants. And now it waits, patient as mountains, for payment that was promised but never delivered. The entry ended there. No signature, no explanation of what promise had been made or why. Every generation, my father said softly, we've managed to keep most people safe by following the rules. But the rules weren't made by us. They were made by that first constable, whoever he was, after he and 8 others survived something at that shrine, something that should have killed them, something they bargained with. You think it's coming to collect? I think it never stopped trying to collect. The Mist Walker takes people every mist season because we still owe it. We owe it 9. He met my eyes. And I think this year it's decided to stop being patient. 7 days left until January 10th. 7 days until mist season ended and the barrier between worlds solidified again. 7 days to figure out what promise had been made 133 years ago and what price we'd have to pay to survive this December. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at our office desk reading every entry in the notebook, looking for patterns, clues, anything that might help me understand what was coming. My wife Aisha gave up trying to convince me to come home around midnight. She knew better than to argue when mist season made me obsessive. Around 3 in the morning I found something. A notation in my grandfather's section, dated January 9, 1962, the year he'd lost 14 people to the Mist Walker. The worst winter in the notebook's history. It wants names, not just bodies. Names. The 9 who made the original pact wrote their names at the shrine, bound themselves to a promise. The thing takes people randomly because it cannot find those specific names anymore. But every person it takes, it examines. It's searching. One day it will find descendants of those 9 original families. And when it does, the debt will be paid in full. I stared at those words as dawn prayer calls echoed across the valley. 9 original families. 9 debts. And I was a Khan, a family that had been in Kalapur since before British times. Morning arrived without my having slept. Aisha found me still hunched over the notebook, circling names, drawing connections between families mentioned across generations. She placed tea beside me without comment. 13 years of marriage had taught her when silence offered more comfort than conversation. The Duranis left safely? She asked, standing at the window where weak December sunlight filtered through. Made it to Peshawar 3 nights ago. Shabnam messaged yesterday. Zainab's nightmares stopped the moment they crossed the district border. Aisha nodded, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Our son Hamza was still asleep, blissfully ignorant of the wrongness seeping into our village. Aisha and I had decided years ago to shield him from the truth as long as possible. Let him believe in a world where monsters stayed in stories. Rashid, Aisha said quietly, still facing the window. Whatever you're planning, whatever you think you need to do, promise me you'll come home. I couldn't make that promise. We both knew it. Instead, I kissed her forehead and headed to the office, the notebook heavy in my bag. Imran was already there, looking as exhausted as I felt. He'd pinned a map of Kalapur to the wall, red markers indicating every incident we'd documented since December 20th. The pattern was obvious once visualized. A rough circle centered on the village square, with Garib Baba's shrine sitting dead center. I've been going through old land records, he said without preamble, trying to identify the 9 families mentioned in that first notebook entry. It's difficult. Most records from before 1900 are incomplete, family names change through marriage. But I found something interesting. He tapped 9 points on the map, each marked with a different colored pin. These 9 properties form a perfect nonagon around the shrine. Too precise for coincidence. And all 9 were owned by founding families. Khan, Ahmed, Durrani, Bibi, Hassan, Raza, Malik, Begum, and Imran. The names hit me like physical blows. Those are families who've lost people this December. Tariq Hassan, Bilal Raza, Ahmed Malik, the boys from the northern ridges. Bashir Ahmed saw his dead son. Sultana Bibi reported the Rule 5 situation. Zainab Durrani. You're a Khan. Imran pointed at his chest. And I'm an Imran. That's 6 families. Who are the 7th, 8th, and 9th? I couldn't find definitive proof, but circumstantial evidence points to 3 more families still living here. The realization settled over me like frozen mist, suffocating and inescapable. We needed to understand what happened at that shrine in 1891, what promise was made, and how to either honor it or break it before January 10th arrived and the mist walker claimed what it believed it was owed. The next 6 days would determine whether Kalapur survived or became another cautionary tale whispered in mountain villages, a warning about debts that span generations and entities that never forget. My name is Rashid Khan. This is the story of how 9 families learned that some promises bind tighter than blood, and some hungers never die, they only wait. And I'm still here watching the calendar count down to January 10th, knowing that in 7 days, everything changes. Because the Mist Walker is coming to collect its debt. And this time I don't think the rules will be enough to save us.